nuclear weapons disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago was attacked and captured by next-generation special forces, being led by members of Foxhound. They're demanding that the government turn over the remains of Big Boss, and they say that if their demands are not met within 24 hours, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. You'll have two mission objectives. First, you're to rescue DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and the president of Armstech, Kenneth Baker. Both are being held as hostages. Secondly, you're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to make a nuclear strike and stop them if they do.
What's the insertion method?
We'll approach the disposal facility by sub.
And then?
We'll launch a one-man SDV. After the SDV gets as close as it can, dispose of it. From there on, you'll have to swim. High-Tech Special Forces Unit Foxhound. Your former unit, and one that I was a commander of.
So they're still around.
There are 6 members of Foxhound involved in this terrorist activity. Psycho Mattis, with his powerful psychic abilities. Sniper Wolf, the beautiful and deadly sharpshooter. Decoy Octopus, master of disguise. Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman. And Revolver Ocelot, specialist in interrogation and a formidable gunfighter. And finally, in charge of them, Foxhound squad leader, Liquid Snake.
Liquid Snake?
The man with the same codename as you. The nuclear weapons disposal facility covers the whole island. I'll instruct you by codec after you reach your target.
Anyone going with me?
As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes. This is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
This is Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. What's the situation, Snake?
Looks like the elevator in the back is the only way up.
Just as I expected. You'll have to take the elevator to the surface, but make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec. The frequency is 140.85. When you want to use the codec, push the select button. When we need to contact you, the codec will beep. When you hear that noise, press the select button. The codec's receiver directly stimulates the small bones of your ear. No one but you will be able to hear it.
Got it. Okay, I'm ready to go.
He mentioned something interesting. Cypher is pursuing new research. He claims that what they're doing in Africa is the missing piece. A weapon to surpass Metal Gear.
Hey there, good people. It's your favorite fat boy, the 8-bit academic here. In today's episode, I'll be giving you a brief show and tell about the third entry in one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, and the very first entry to be released on console. namely the PlayStation 1 or PSX back in the year 1998. I'm of course talking about the very first Metal Gear Solid game. However, what most people today don't realize, especially many fans of the franchise, is that this wasn't actually the first game in the series, with it actually being a sequel to two other prior games that were released in 1987 and 1990 respectively, namely Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which were released on the MSX2 computer system. And yes, I know, there was another unimportant sequel released in 1989 called Snake's Revenge, but we don't talk about that one. Anyway, Metal Gear Solid was developed by famous Japanese games development company Konami, with one of the gaming industry's most famous directors at the helm, our Lord and Savior Hideo Kojima. Being inspired by films like The Great Escape and having to deal with hardware limitations on the MSX2 during development of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, Kojima decided to change the focus from an action game to a tactical stealth game, and this decision would continue in Metal Gear Solid for the PSX and all the installments that would follow afterwards, with the exception being Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, which took a more hack and slash over-the-top action approach. Due to the success of Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 console, it would end up becoming one of the biggest franchises in gaming history, laying the foundations for the stealth action genre and inspiring other franchises like Splinter Cell, Hitman, and Assassin's Creed, at least in terms of its stealth mechanics to varying degrees. So it's fair to say that Metal Gear Solid and its two prequels from the late 80s are the granddaddies of the modern stealth action genre. Metal Gear Solid was also one of the first games to push forward the idea that games could be seen as an art form and a new medium for meaningful storytelling, especially due to its themes of nuclear armament, militarization, technological progress, war, geopolitics, international relations, and much more. I mean, there's a whole scene towards the end of Metal Gear Solid 2 where Kojima and co basically predicted the direction the internet would take and how information would be catered in a specific way to sway public opinion, misinformation, AI-generated content, media bias, polarization. It's freaking genius. Definitely deserving of a chef's kiss. And yes, I definitely am a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid series, having played all of them except for the first two Metal Gear games from the 80s and the PSP exclusive Metal Gear Tactical Ops, because I never owned a PSP. My favorite being Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. I still maintain that that is the best one out of them all, and I can't wait to play the remake. But despite me being such a big fan, I'm sure you can already tell by the gameplay I recorded here that I'm absolutely terrible at the stealth part.
You don't have future here. You don't have future. You can never make it. You're supposed to be a dinner man, serving dinner to the students in the secondary school. Because you cannot do basic 1+1.
Anyway, on to today's topic. I figured that since one of the main themes of the Metal Gear Solid games is nuclear armament, a good topic that would relate perfectly to this is a discussion about ICBMs. This episode was partly also inspired by the incident that took place on the 21st of November 2024, of Ukrainian forces claiming that Russia had launched an ICBM into Ukrainian territory, targeting the city of Dnipro. Later, however, the United States and Russia confirmed that it wasn't an ICBM, but rather an IRBM, which I will explain a bit later in this video. Also, just a side note about the Ukraine-Russia war, shit's getting really scary, and I hope a resolution can be reached soon because nuclear conflict is not going to be a fun time for anybody. Like seriously, we haven't been this close to nuclear annihilation since the Cold War. We might as well be in Cold War II at this point. But anyway, I digress. This video is not about geopolitics, and if that's what you're looking for, then please go watch a channel that deals with that type of information respectively. So what exactly is an ICBM? Some of you might ask. Well, in short, the acronym ICBM stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile.
I am Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. I am a Dangerous Diabolic.
And it's basically a guided missile that can travel across vast distances and strike targets in other continents and countries, even if they are situated on the other side of the planet. A ballistic missile is essentially a type of missile that uses projectile motion to deliver warheads on a target, the warhead being the explodey part. The two types that exist are namely short-range ballistic missiles, or SRBMs, which tend to stay within the Earth's atmosphere, while larger missiles have the ability to travel outside the atmosphere. The type of ballistic missile with the greatest range is the one that is the topic of today's video, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, with some of the largest ICBMs being capable of full orbital flight, as in they can go to space. Most ICBMs are able to travel about 5,500 kilometers, which is about 3,400 miles, and are primarily designed for nuclear weapons delivery, delivering one or more thermonuclear warhead. Conventional, chemical, and biological weapons can also be delivered with varying effectiveness, but have never been deployed in ICBMs. Most modern designs allow a single missile to carry several warheads, each of which can strike a different target. To date, the United States, Russia, China, France, India, the United Kingdom, Israel, and North Korea are the only countries known to have operational ICBMs. Pakistan is the only nuclear-armed state that does not possess ICBMs. The first practical design for an ICBM grew out of Nazi Germany's V2 rocket program, the liquid-fueled V2, designed by Wernher von Braun and his team, was then widely used by Nazi Germany from mid-1944 until March 1945 towards the end of World War II to bomb British and Belgian cities, particularly Antwerp and London. Under Project America, von Braun's team developed the A9/10 ICBM, intended for use in bombing New York and other American cities. Initially intended to be guided by radio, it was changed to be a piloted craft after the failure of Operation Elster, which was an attempt at carrying out a German espionage mission intended to gather intelligence on US military and technology facilities during World War II. The second stage of the A9/A10 rocket was tested a few times in January and February of 1945. After the war, the US executed Operation Paperclip, which I will be covering more in a future video, which took von Braun and hundreds of other leading Nazi scientists to the United States to develop IRBMs, ICBMs, and launchers for the US Army. The first nuclear weapons were bombs delivered by aircraft, such as the atomic bombs developed by the American military research program titled the Manhattan Project, which would later be used in the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, marking the official end of the Second World War and the destruction of the Japanese Empire. As mentioned earlier, warheads were eventually developed for strategic ballistic missiles, which have become by far the most common nuclear weapons to this day. Smaller tactical nuclear weapons have also been developed over the decades, including ones for artillery projectiles, landmines, anti-submarine depth charges, torpedoes, and shorter-range ballistic and cruise missiles. Wait, there are landmine nukes? By far the greatest driving force behind the desire to develop nuclear weapons after World War II was the Cold War confrontation that pitted the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its satellite states, as well as its allies. During this period, which lasted roughly from 1945 to 1991, the American stockpile of nuclear weapons reached its peak in 1966, with more than 32,000 warheads of 30 different types. During the 1990s, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, many types of tactical strategic weapons were retired and dismantled to comply with arms control negotiations, such as the Strategic Arms Reduction Talks or as unilateral initiatives. By 2010, the United States had approximately 9,400 warheads of 9 types, including 2 types of bombs, 3 types for intercontinental ballistic missiles, aka ICBMs, 2 types for submarine launch ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and 2 types for cruise missiles. Some types existed in several modifications. Of these 9,400 warheads, an estimated 2,468 were operational, that is, mated to a delivery system such as a missile. The rest were either spares held in reserve or retired warheads scheduled to be dismantled. Of the 2,468 operational warheads, approximately 1,968 were deployed on strategic long-range delivery systems, and some 500 deployed on non-strategic short-range systems. Of the 500 non-strategic warheads in the US arsenal, about 200 were deployed in Europe. The Soviet nuclear stockpile reached its peak of about 33,000 operational warheads in 1988, with an additional 10,000 previously deployed warheads that had been retired but had not been taken apart. After the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Russia accelerated its warhead dismantlement program, but the status of many of the 12,000 warheads estimated to remain in its stockpile in 2010 was unclear. Given limited Russian resources and lack of legitimate military missions, only about 4,600 of these 12,000 warheads were serviceable and maintained enough to be deployed. Of the 4,600 operational warheads, some 2,600 were deployed on strategic systems and some 2,000 on non-strategic systems, which means that to date, the United States and Russia are the only 2 countries with the largest stockpiles of nuclear weapons. China also developed a minimal independent nuclear deterrent, entering its own Cold War after an ideological split with the Soviet Union beginning in the early 1960s. After first testing a domestic-built nuclear weapon in 1964, it went on to develop various warheads and missiles and has a stockpile of around 500 nuclear warheads. Along with China, there's also India, which started its 3-stage nuclear program in the 1950s and conducting its first test in 1974, with a current stockpile of 172. Pakistan, which started its nuclear program in 1972 with a current stockpile of 170, North Korea with a stockpile of 50 since 1963, Israel, which started in 1966 with a stockpile estimated between 90 and 400. Damn. Israeli intelligence working real hard to keep those numbers a secret, even from their allies. That's insane. And the NATO countries with a combined stockpile of 4,223, with the main beneficiaries of such powerful weapons of mass destruction shared between England, France, and the United States. And believe it or not, at one point even South Africa had its own stockpile in the 1980s, with a meager number of only 6 nuclear weapons, but it was short-lived due to the decision to denuclearize in 1989, which in my opinion was a very stupid decision. It's not fair that all the northern powers have the big guns. No wonder they keep bullying us. Anyway, it's so comforting to know that we have the capability to destroy ourselves at literally the push of a button, and that we're edging closer and closer to living in the Fallout universe thanks to the new rock-hard missile measuring contest between East and West. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I think we should start reintroducing those duck and cover drills and saving up a bunch of bottle caps just in case. That's if you don't end up being vaporized or turned into a nasty ghoul by high levels of radiation exposure.
Smooth skin.
But finally, this brings us back to the weapon that was used in Ukraine last November. The initial claims were that it was an ICBM, but both Russian and US intelligence later confirmed that it was an IRBM, or Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile. So still a ballistic missile, though it lacks any nuclear capabilities. There exists currently at least several other types of ballistic missiles aside from the ICBM and IRBM. These include the MRBM, or Medium Range Ballistic Missile, the SRBM, or Short Range Ballistic Missile, and TBM, or Tactical Ballistic Missiles, each being differentiated by their range, speed, and distance they can travel, with the Tactical Ballistic Missile being mainly used against specific military targets and having the shortest range of the bunch, with the goal of being deployed quickly on a battlefield. Anyway, that's it for today's episode of the 8-Bit Academic. Thank you so much for sticking it through to the end. This was a bit of a long episode to put together due to the large amounts of information out there regarding ICBMs, nuclear armament, and its history. If you like my content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment, share it with your friends, and if you know of anything I may have missed or gotten wrong, please feel free to share in the comments below. I'm also open to suggestions for topics to discuss and research as well, so any interesting facts or bits of information you would like to see me cover on the channel, please let me know and I will definitely add it to the ever-growing list. That's it for now, but please stay tuned for more upcoming fun facts, trivia, and interesting tidbits from me, the 8-Bit Academic.
Hurt me more. That's it. I remember that crunch.
Colonel, are you hiding something from me?
Absolutely not. Snake, you've got to understand, this op is security level red. You need the highest security clearance to get access to the complete file.
You want me to believe that you're in charge of this op, but you don't have complete access to the file?
I told you, the Secretary of Defense is in operational control. I'm just here as your support. Snake, we don't have time to debate. Get out of there and find President Baker.
I'm too tired. Maybe later.